We're now going to move to the third of the themes or focus areas, on workforce and market. And we've got two presenters. We're going to sort of change our approach slightly, where in fact Matthew Gillette. Matthew is from the Industry Development Manager position within the Community Services Industry Alliance as part of Workability Consortium in Queensland. And Matthew will be presenting on workforce issues, and then he'll be followed by John Riley, who's the Branch Manager of Market Oversight Program Transition with the NDIS Market Reform Group in the Department of Social Services. So this particular session is taking us to a point now where we're going to be concentrating on workforce and market leading up to the lunch period. They'll be going back to back, so it's a bit of a tag team here. So the first person to come up will be Matthew. So please make Matthew feel welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony, and thanks, everyone. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting today and pay my respects to elders past and present and those emerging. I've been asked to talk a little bit about the Workability Project, and part of my role is Project Manager for the Consortium project. As you can see on the slide, there's quite a few agencies involved in the consortium. We're funded through the Queensland Government with support from the NDIS Sector Development Fund, and the four consortium partners, CSIA, the organisation I work with, the Workforce Council, National Disability Services and QCOS. And as you can imagine, it's quite a beast to be working in a four-partner consortium, but we're really proud of the work that we've done and what we've been able to achieve by working together. Of course, we don't do that I don't achieve that on my own. I achieve that through the work of some really key people in those agencies. And I'd like to acknowledge Kylie Hogan from NDS, who's here today, Donna Baines Faye from QCOS, who's here. I'm not sure if Louise Villanova, who's the key representative from Workforce Council, is here, but I really think that the power of us working together has achieved an enormous amount, and I hope you'll agree by the end of what I've got to tell you today. So I thought I'd start with a graph. This is my only graph. I know it's a data session, but this is the one and only one that I'll provide. We know that in the lead up to the NDIS, the Queensland Government estimated 13,000 full-time equivalent jobs would be produced as a result of the NDIS. Closer to the rollout, the NDIA produced their market position statement, and they upped those estimates. They estimated somewhere between 15,900 and 19,400 full-time equivalent jobs. Now, these are jobs within the NDIS framework. These are jobs working with people with a disability as part of their NDIS plans. Now, because most of the jobs in the sector are actually part-time, or many of the jobs in the sector, the average hours of work in the sector is 25 hours a week. So if you extrapolate out that 19,500 jobs to an average of 25 hours a week, you get almost 30,000 new jobs as a result of the NDIS. So that's a huge undertaking. It's a very big task. And we saw earlier that the rollout of the NDIS, the entry of new participants into the NDIS has been slower than what we might have expected. As you might expect, the growth in workforce is largely due to the new entrants into the scheme, not entirely. So many people who are entering the scheme who've received services previously are seeing some increase in the quantum of supports, but also the types of supports. So there's certainly workforce growth and workforce implications from the existing transition. But the big jobs growth is trying to provide the workforce to support the new entrants. And while it's been disappointing to see the number of new entrants moving into the scheme more slowly, from a workforce planning perspective, it's actually been quite helpful because that has given us a little bit more time to produce a pipeline of people who are well suited and well skilled to do the work that we're trying to do. So just quickly in this graph, you'll see that in the first, North Queensland and Mackay and Southwest Queensland, which were the first years, we're expecting somewhere between, in North Queensland, 800 and 1,500 new workers. In Mackay, somewhere between 500 and 1,000. And in Southwest Queensland, between 1,000 and 1,600. We see similar numbers expected in Maryborough and Central Queensland, but the Ipswich area is one of our big leaps. Now, I'm hoping you won't ask whether we've achieved these jobs growth figures, because nobody knows. We are certainly monitoring the situation, and we're certainly aware that there has been significant jobs growth. We know in last year's rollout regions that there has been pressure on jobs growth, and that some organisations have been finding it difficult to attract the right workers and enough of the right workers. We expect that demand for jobs growth will continue as we've heard earlier, as participants continue to enter the scheme over about 5 years. We'll expect the workforce demand to continue in that pattern. What's a little bit scary, though, is in the same way that 2/3 of the participants will enter the scheme in the 2018-19 year, that's where we expect the most significant jobs growth. 2/3 of those 30,000 will be generated somewhere around that 2018-19 year and the year or two following. And much of that growth is in the southeast corner. So I really want to emphasise today that workforce is going to be one of the big issues that organisations will need to address in order to meet the demands of the participants in the NDIS. So what are we doing about that? Well, our role is to work with skills ecosystem partners to develop and grow the non-government NDIS workforce in Queensland. Now, the skills ecosystem we refer to is a multi-stakeholder approach. So importantly for the NDIS, we've put people with a disability and their advocates and their families at the centre of our work. So we have ecosystems groups at a statewide level, and then in each of the rollout regions that include people with a disability and their families and carers, advocacy groups, employers, and then we reach out to training providers, the universities, unions, and job active services and the disability employment services. And we bring all of those different stakeholders together to work together to identify what the barriers and opportunities are to enabling the NDIS workforce in that region and at a statewide level. We see our role as very much as a linkage project. So our starting position is that there are a lot of resources out there that have supported people to get jobs, to support people to be trained, to connect up employers with training providers and with people seeking job opportunities. But much of that effort hasn't been well directed towards the community services industry or in particular the disability sector. So our role in bringing all these stakeholders together is to strengthen those connections. We see our role as representing the industry and bringing the industry's needs to those other stakeholders and supporting a collaboration that will make a difference over time. So I've been asked to talk a little bit about our regional approach because that's the area where we get the most effective collaboration on the ground in each region. So we've been funded to support a regional coordinator in each of the rollout regions as it occurs. So we were in Townsville for the duration of the transition period. Our worker finished up there in January. We've just finished up recently in Mackay, and our worker in Southwest is finishing in a matter of weeks. And our role is to work together to bring together those action groups to develop a collaborative action plan, and then we're there to support that implementation of those actions for about a 12-month period in most cases. Part of our role in developing those collaborations is to try and support a continued effort after our funded support role has ceased. And we've been very pleased to see that in the regions that we've departed so far, that has been the case. So in North Queensland, the Department of Employment has helped to provide secretariat support for the action group that we set up there, and that action group is continuing to work together on NDIS workforce activities there. In the Mackay region, it's the Regional Council through their community development function is playing a secretariat role, and we're continuing to see the stakeholders come together. And we're now looking at how we might transition the Southwest region over the next coming weeks. So it's an important project in terms of forming up those local collaborations and getting an action plan that and beginning to implement it. But it's also really important that everyone understands that this project won't be there for a long time. The project will be there for about the transition period, and that it's that local effort and those local connections that we're trying to strengthen to make sure that effort continues over the coming years as the workforce growth continues to occur. So we have regional coordinators active in these regions at the moment. So our Ipswich, Lockyer, Somerset and Scenic Rim region. Our workforce coordinator there is Hayley Westbro. She's unwell and I don't think she's been able to make it today. In Bundaberg, it's Melinda Everett, and Melinda is over in the corner. Please grab her if you're interested in finding more out about that region. And Melinda will also cover off Hervey Bay, Bundaberg and Maryborough regions. For the greater southeast Queensland, we've split the area from Gympie to the coast into two. So for the Gympie, Sunshine Coast, Caboolture, North Brisbane area, it's Ian Montague, who's about to raise his hand over here. And next to him, Helen Hanson is responsible for Brisbane South down to the Gold Coast. Deb Selway, who is in the far north Queensland, and we're just recruiting for our Central Queensland coordinator. So for the next 9 months, all of these people will be on the ground to support activity over the period to transition. As you might notice, the funding arrangements are slightly different for South East Queensland, so we're actually active earlier than in other regions. That's for a number of reasons, but one of the important reasons is because we expect the jobs growth to be so significant. We're really trying to work on that pipeline of getting people job ready as early as we can. So in each region, we develop a workforce profile. These are all now completed. The Rockhampton one will be completed this week. In each region, we've done a workforce profile that looks at the local demographic data, what the population looks like, what the workforce projections are, and we've broken the workforce projections down to local government area, so you can get quite a clear picture of the NDIA's projections, then broken down into LGAs. We look at the education training supply data, and then we look at information on local priorities. And this is really the basis for our workforce planning. These documents provide a wealth of information that help you to understand where the opportunities and relationships might be that will support growth and development of the workforce locally. It's important to say that no matter how we cut the data in each region, if you look at how many people do we need, how many are looking for work, how many have we trained over the last few years, we end up with a big gap in each region. So even using the traditional supply methods to get people into this work, we will still have a big problem on our hands. So it's important to really get a handle on the current situation in order to really plan for the future. So from this information, the collaborations develop up workforce plans, and we focus mainly on two areas. So I've talked a lot about the emerging workforce, the jobs growth, and that is the big issue that we're facing. But importantly, we need to look at how do we support the current workforce to develop the skills and transition successfully across to the NDIS. So it will take different kinds of skills. It will take a different approach. It will take new ways of thinking about and working with people to be successful in the NDIS and realise the transformation that the NDIS represents for people with disability. If we're not careful about supporting our current workforce to get those skills and to be supported into their new way of working, we'll lose them, and the jobs growth problem will only get bigger. We need to support the workforce who are able to come on the journey with us to do that. And so we've been looking at what strategies we can use to support that transition as well. I'll quickly go through some of the things that have appeared in the workforce plans. In terms of the current workforce, we've looked at improvements to the training quality and design. So there's been concerns in pockets around whether the quality of the training for workers in this area has been high quality enough, and also whether the actual training products are meeting the NDIS needs. So significant feedback has come from particularly consumers and their families that some of the previous training has taken a deficit approach, and that we need to make sure that if we are training people into NDIS roles, we take a full understanding of what's possible through the NDIS. So we're trying to do a bit of we are doing a stock take at the moment around the kinds of training that's available and how fit for purpose it is for the NDIS. And in the next couple of months, we'll be publishing that work so that employers are able to see what we've been able to identify that meets the needs for the NDIS and actually will support choice and control for individuals. So at the same time, we're looking at trying to provide some funding and supports for some key areas that we've already identified. So supporting choice and control, supporting customer service skills for the existing workforce. Many employers have told us that language literacy, numeracy, and particularly digital literacy is an issue moving forward. And so we're working with the Queensland Government to identify what kinds of programs already exist in that LL&N space and how we might adapt those for the NDIS workforce. We're focusing on high-level skills to support people already working in the industry to develop skills with perhaps different cohorts or more high-level clinical skills or working with different types of equipment. And then we're also focusing very much on support for leadership and management. Now, each of these has taken a different flavour in each workforce action plan, but also we've been working at the same time with the Queensland Government around a training quality and training subsidy program, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a sec. For the emerging workforce, we've been doing quite a bit of work to raise the profile of NDIS jobs. So we've been working with job actives to inform them about the NDIS and the types of work available and the types of workers we're looking for. We've also been doing jobs expos, careers in disability expos. So we've just recently completed one in Toowoomba. There's a careers in disability expo planned for Ipswich on the 15th of November. And we'll be doing expos in Central Queensland, Cairns and Southeast Queensland next year. We're working with a marketing company around a social media campaign, and we expect that to be rolling out in the next couple of months, where we'll be targeting both job seekers and people looking to change their career to think about working in the NDIS using an approach of, be part of a social change, be part of the future, and be part of what the NDIS represents. And we've also been doing quite a bit of school and university engagement. Most of the working groups have identified schools as a bit of a gap in terms of our workforce planning previously, and we're really starting to get some runs on the board in relation to really providing information to schools and parents about NDIS careers and beginning to get some training programs up and running that would support NDIS careers. And in that respect, I'd really like to acknowledge Barry Dowling, who's here from the Department of Education and Training, who's been doing some fantastic work in the southern part of Brisbane around health career pathways and moving in now to disability career pathways. And we're really starting to see some great stuff happen with schools there. We've also been working on some pre-employment programs, so again, working with job actives, designing up information sessions and selection events, so very clearly looking at getting the right people. If we get the right people, we can give them the right skills. There's no point recruiting and skilling people who are not going to be right for the NDIS. And also we've been working with job actives to support job readiness programs and also support more placements in disability services for people who are studying and interested in a career. I've talked about talent attraction. We're working with NDS around their values-based recruitment toolkit to look at implementing that through the Southeast. I've mentioned school pathways and also induction programs. Many organisations over the years, and certainly in this project, have talked about supporting common induction programs. So we're exploring that work. And also we know that the NDIS Quality and Safeguards framework will have a compulsory induction component. So we're trying to get ahead of that and try to support a common induction approach that will support workers, support employers to bring more workers in at scale. And we're just now starting to work with the universities to explore how we can support better placement for allied health professionals in the NDIS workforce so that we could attract more, particularly speech pathologists, occupational therapists, physiotherapists and others. And we're also looking at some of the leadership and capacity building that is available through universities and how we can tailor that to the new business paradigm of the NDIS. So a lot of information very quickly. I'm sorry about that, but we will all be here over lunch and this afternoon if you'd like to talk to us more about it. I wanted to finish off just by talking about the new Queensland Vet Investment Plan. It was released just a month ago, and rather unusually, there are only 3 industry priorities identified. It's a market-driven strategy with the exception of 3 key areas. One is tourism. We love tourism in Queensland. One is the Commonwealth Games. And the third is the NDIS. So the Queensland Government has really recognised that the jobs growth and development potential of the NDIS is a critical issue for Queensland Government and Queensland's economy. And we now have the NDIS as one of the highest priority industries in the skilling strategy for the state. This is a really great moment. I think I get excited about it. But it means that the Queensland Government is really recognising that your sector really does need support to develop the skills and the jobs that are available. So we've been working with the Queensland Government around an NDIS training strategy. We've been successful in negotiating some additional incentives and subsidies available to support skill sets and qualifications that relate to the NDIS, and we hope over the next couple of months we'll be able to begin to provide more information about that and really start to work towards the jobs growth for next year. I think now I'll hand over to John.
Good morning, everyone. It's always good to come to Queensland. Even in my 2016 Premier's tie, it's good for 6 more sleeps. I hope you'll still listen now. Look, I'm going to talk to you about NDIS market and workforce today. It's very economic terms and so forth, but I begin by thanking you all for your support of people with disability. I'm very mindful this is more than a job and more than a market. DSS acknowledges the traditional owners on whose land we meet today and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Bit of an outline of what I'll talk to you about. I'll go through some of the data we have about the NDIS market and its development. I'll try to gloss over the things that I know Geraldine talked about in her presentation this morning and focus on those areas where there's newer or different insights. I'll then give you a little bit of information about how the Commonwealth programs are transitioning into the scheme and trying to translate what this means for the provider community. Some caveats before we start. Look, the NDIA collects a substantial amount of data about participants and registered providers, which is reported regularly through its quarterly reports, including some key market metrics. While this data helps to provide some insights into the NDIS, it does have some limitations. For one, it's about participants who are already in the scheme, which is around a quarter of the 460,000 participants we expect at full scheme. It's also affected by the different phasing and transition schedules adopted in each state and territory. While Queensland, like most jurisdictions, is going through a geographic rollout of the scheme, in South Australia and Tasmania, it's been age-based cohorts. It's a long way around of saying the numbers are skewed towards young children. As the data is drawn from participant plans and claims for payments made against them, it doesn't tell us much about unmet participant demand, though I was really interested in what was said a little bit earlier in that regard, about the new group. State and territory governments continue to provide supports to participants on an in-kind basis, to varying degrees, which are assumed in the data to have been utilised 100% by participants. And then finally, the rapid transition, throughout the transition, the rapid scale up to full scheme in some markets will create variability in the results. For example, some results may appear to decline or make no substantial improvement between quarters, although this could be a function of increased population size rather than flagging a risk or a problem in that market. As most of the data I'll talk about is for the first 12 months of transition, it's too early to form views about permanent trends or to reliably identify those. Look, this is one bit where I'll scoot over it pretty quickly because I know Geraldine touched on these earlier. And you'll get the slides later, so don't worry about squinting. Look, generally the age profile is consistent nationally and in Queensland. So there's nothing particularly different here in Queensland that we're seeing compared with elsewhere. When we turn to the funding profile, nationally about 70% of the money is going out of the scheme in terms of assistance with daily living activities. In Queensland it's about 65%. 5% in some things could be a significant difference. It's probably not. It just tells you that look, that is the largest single part of the NDIS. Similarly, 62% of the national participant intake are people with intellectual disability and autism. In Queensland, that's about 50%. Again, that's probably skewed a little bit by the age-based transition in some areas, which is focused on children in some of those schemes. Then if I turn to NDIS market development and the key elements of a mature NDIS. In June 2015, the Disability Reform Council, which is all the state and territory and Commonwealth ministers, published an integrated NDIS market sector and workforce strategy that outlined a vision for a mature market. This focused on three key market actors: consumers, providers and workers, and all have a role in shaping the NDIS. At the centre of any market are consumers wanting or needing goods and services. The NDIS has fundamentally shifted disability services delivery to give people with disability the dignity of choice and control about how, when and where to access the reasonable and necessary supports they need to achieve their goals. For a market to operate efficiently and effectively, consumers need to be able to make informed decisions about the goods and services they'd like to receive and the providers they want to receive them from. Providers, in turn, are needed to be capable of responding to participant demand and are also necessary to any market. In a mature NDIS, sustainable providers will offer a full range of diverse products and services to meet participant needs. They'll respond to demand by adjusting what they offer or how they deliver to meet participant needs or creating new products and services. Providers will meet the relevant industry standards and regulatory obligations to ensure quality supports are provided. And then finally, capable workers are needed to deliver those quality supports. Best available estimates indicate there is some way to go to ensure workforce growth is sufficient to meet demand in a mature market. So if I touch for a moment on informed consumers, it's very difficult to measure the extent to which participants are able to act as informed consumers. We can, however, use funding for supports that help participants to be informed consumers as a proxy for this part of the market. This data indicates that a high proportion of participants have funding for coordination supports in their plans, at around half of participants nationally and over 2/3 of participants in Queensland. That's in the second graph. And while more Queensland participants are accessing financial and service intermediary supports than the national average, it's still a low proportion of participants at 11% and 7% respectively. There's a few reasons for this, or a few reasons this could be the case. The intermediary market is still developing and emerging in response to the NDIS, and participants may be finding it difficult to connect with the services that meet their needs. And I think Paige touched on a little bit of that earlier. It is also likely, given the block-funded approach to disability supports prior to the NDIS, that participants will need time and support to develop their skills as informed consumers and start using them in the market. You can still exercise choice and stay with the same provider. While it isn't clear that what is driving these results, it is promising that small increases can be seen between the quarters. Governments have invested in building participant capacity to engage in the market service delivery model encouraged by the NDIS. The Commonwealth Sector Development Fund has been used by state and territory governments, and that was a large contribution to what Matthew was talking about in the last session, including in Queensland, to help reduce the time taken for participants to enter the scheme by ensuring they're adequately prepared for the planning process, particularly for participants who may be difficult to engage. We know they're not new issues. The NDIS just casts them in a different light. But they could be difficult to engage because of language or housing barriers or interactions with child protection and justice systems and many more things. If we look at choice and control, giving participants that choice and control over their disability supports is, of course, one of the underlying principles of the NDIS. But again, it's difficult to measure directly. The number and rate of new providers per participant can be seen as a proxy, whilst how participants are choosing to financially manage their plans can give us some indication of participant control. What we see in the data is that on average, participants receive supports from more than one provider and choose to receive supports from new providers fairly consistently across the quarters. It's important to note that these results are averaged and are unlikely to represent typical participant behaviour, but they do suggest that participants are exercising choice to seek and receive services from new providers. We can measure control a little bit more directly through how participants choose to manage their plans financially, though this is still a proxy of control in the broader sense intended under the scheme. Results in Queensland and nationally are consistent with 16% and 17% of participants respectively exercising some control in the financial management of their plan. As with building capacity to be informed consumers, it will take time for participants to build their skills and confidence to exercise that choice and control. I know Geraldine touched on plan activation earlier, so I'm not going to spend very much time on it. But I will say in these graphs there's a skew in each towards early activation, with around half of participants receiving their first service within 30 days of their plan being approved, and this is true in Queensland and nationally. And it grows to around 80% within, if we look at the time period between activation and first service, and we take a 90-day period. Look, there's more work there needed, but I just thought it was worth touching on. If we look at plan utilisation and reviews, while utilisation rates are expected to increase, it's unlikely that they'll reach 100%. Work is still underway to understand what drives utilisation, but a few things that could be underpinning these results include participants could be saving some of their plan budgets for unexpected support needs. Participants may be accessing the amount of support they can manage without accessing the full range of supports committed in their plans. And planned budgets could be overestimating the amount of supports participants need. Finally, participants may not be able to access the supports they're looking for in the market. Look, one of the things that I have managed over the years is the Commonwealth's NDIS Lite products, as I call them, the Helping Children with Autism and Better Start for Children with Disability, where families and carers receive $12,000 to support their children with allied health services and equipment. What we see there is it takes a while for people to get into a service usage pattern. It takes them a while to find the service provider who's right for them, and that service provider might change over time as the child develops. I haven't got anything better that suggests that the NDIS itself will be different, albeit at a much larger scale and with more complex interactions of needs. Look, I want to touch on on the plan review issues. Look, they're scheduled with participants as part of the planning cycle to ensure committed supports continue to reflect what is reasonable and necessary for the participant to achieve their goals and aspirations. Unscheduled plan reviews can also be initiated by the NDIA, the participant or their nominee, if there's a significant change in the participant's circumstances. This could include where a participant's disability support needs are changing, their informal care arrangements change significantly, they're applying for, receiving or being entitled to compensation for an injury, they're moving house, overseas or permanently into aged care residential accommodation. It's a really wide range of things can lead to a plan review. Unscheduled plan reviews are fairly consistent for Queensland and the national markets, with slightly more unscheduled reviews in Q1 and Q2 in the Queensland market. This is more likely to do with population size than specific differences, but we'll keep watching that one. If we turn now to providers and provider diversity, data to measure market elements relating to providers is still emerging. One area where we have some data is provider diversity through data collected by the NDIA's registration process. There continues to be steady growth in provider registrations, both in Queensland and nationally, with around 40% and 30% respectively, so 40% in Queensland. The number of new supports offered to participants is also increasing across the quarters, increasing by around 170% in Queensland between quarters 3 and 4, compared with 15% nationally. Now, as you'd expect, that needs some explaining. These differences are consistent with the Queensland and national transition schedules, with different rates of growth associated with some states being closer to full scheme than others. So they were starting from a lower base at the stage of transition they were at. With ongoing growth in provider registrations, the fact that the proportion of providers active in the market continues to remain steady at around 40% is a positive result, indicating participants are connecting with providers at a steady rate. We also know many of the not yet active providers have registered in advance of NDIS rollout in their area. So certainly what the Commonwealth does is we advise people to approach the registration process well in advance of the rollout. And I'm sure Queensland Government does the same thing with its. providers. Some provider market elements we're not yet able to measure effectively include financial health and sustainability, including the impact of NDIS pricing and the extent to which the providers are meeting industry standards and regulatory obligations. The data is not yet able to tell us much about the quality of supports. If I turn to market diversity, consistent with what we saw in the funding profile of the market, the top 5 registration groups by share of claimed services relate to personal care and community participation, or around 80% of claimed services both in Queensland and nationally. And these payments are primarily going to the top 25% of providers in the market, accounting for at least 80% of market share in the top 5 registration groups. So there's a little bit of course it would say that. If that's the overwhelmingly largest area of service, then it stands to reason that the larger providers providing those services are the ones who end up as in the top 25% of providers. Around 40% of businesses in the market are individual and sole traders, which is broadly consistent with the broader Australian economy. We're not yet able to measure the proportion of for-profit and not-for-profit businesses in the sector effectively, but this is something we're looking to develop. So if we take in mind all of those caveats I outlined at the start, there's a few insights about the market we can draw out. The disability support sector is developing in response to the NDIS. Participants are entering the scheme in increasing numbers and appear to be exercising some choice and control over their plans and the supports they access. And at least some are using funded supports to help build their capacity to be informed consumers. Providers are also entering the scheme and offering a range of supports in the market. Personal care and support's the largest segment, both nationally and locally. While some small differences can be seen between the national and Queensland markets, these are likely due to the different phasing of participant entry into the scheme and stage of transition reached in each state and territory. We're able to measure some elements of the mature NDIS market more effectively than others, and our understanding of what is driving some of the results we are seeing in what we can measure is still developing. But the data and how we use it to measure market development and performance, as well as our ability to analyse it, will continue to improve. If we turn to the NDIS workforce development, you'd be forgiven for thinking I'd forgotten about that element. And of course I haven't, because it's the largest single thing that my branch is responsible for. While capable workers are a critical element of the NDIS, our ability to measure and understand that workforce is not as well developed. This is something we're working to improve, but I can share with you what we think we know now. We will have some proxy measures available in the not too distant future around the size of the NDIS workforce. We're looking at things about how many people have completed what will be the mandatory quality and safeguards orientation about the scheme, as well as there's an economic model being developed. If we look at workforce demand, there are around 73,000 full-time jobs in the disability support sector in the middle of 2013. That's projected to grow to 162,000 full-time jobs over 4 years, so to 2019. While this increase is significant in and of itself, the growth is needed at a time of substantial growth in other sectors. So it's important to realise that we are not the only expanding sector, whether that's aged care, childcare, and early childhood education more broadly. So there's competition between sectors as well as within our own. Another way of putting this, and admittedly I stole this from a consultant, is that the NDIS will be the largest or near largest job creation scheme in Australia's history. They've got this cute little slide that lines it up against the Snowy Hydro scheme, the NBN and assorted other things. And the 80,000 or so new jobs that are going to be created through the NDIS clearly outstrips all of those. It's also worth noting that it's a local job creation scheme. So the jobs will be where the NDIS participants live to a large degree. Workforce participation, fiscal sustainability and delivering on the NDIS are important policy objectives that come together in meeting the scheme's workforce demands. Disability supports worker skill levels roles vary, with around 80% of disability workers holding at least a Cert 3 qualification, with only 1/3 of these workers indicating their most relevant qualification was directly related to disability. That's an unpublished PricewaterhouseCoopers report, who are not the consultants I stole that other bit from, planning for a sustainable disability workforce. So what's DSS done to date? Well, we've done activity on 3 levels. There's the Sector Development Fund projects and so forth. We had 5 different goals, 2 of which related to market and workforce. Taking these at a sort of more granular level, we've funded the development of the National Disability Services Provider Readiness Toolkit, which assists providers to develop their organisational capacity to operate in the NDIS. If you haven't already used that, I really recommend you go and do that. It's a quick way of finding out where you're at with your NDIS readiness. We're in the process. In fact, I think the grant selection process closes tomorrow for the budget measure this year for boosting the local care workforce program, which has 3 elements to it. Some regional coordinators, will be up to 25 skilled coordinators across Australia, including I think 4 in Queensland, but don't hold me to that. It's roughly equivalent to how many to the population. So they'll work with existing local service providers and businesses entering the disability market to help them adapt to the demands of an open consumer-driven market. They'll boost the workforce by supporting providers to improve their workforce planning, modelling and development capability, including recruitment. They'll also establish links with the employer liaison officers and mainstream employment services. It's probably worth saying that in Queensland we would hope and expect them to work closely with Workability and the great work they've already done. The next tier of activity here is some specialist coordinators. Up to 10 nationally focused coordinators will be engaged by the same organisation to provide a national approach to disability sector market issues and responding to aged care reform. They'll work with key industry stakeholders to identify and analyse risks, including consumer demand versus provider supply, and identify gaps in the market before making recommendations to address these. They'll have a key focus on a few discrete areas. Look, these include but are not limited to specialist disability accommodation, participants with high and complex support needs, supporting market development in regional and rural Australia, and encouraging more Indigenous-owned organisations to the NDIS as providers. Just by the by, do you know that an Indigenous-controlled organisation is 100 times more likely to employ an Indigenous worker than other organisations? And then the final part of the initiative is that I think you might all have the opportunity to see some of, is to build on the knowledge and information through the first 2 initiatives. Up to 720 individual service providers each year will be assisted financially to access relevant professional services that will assist them to prepare their businesses to deliver under the NDIS. Look, I call it a 10+10 model. They get some assistance directly from a business consultant. They're there to draw up an action plan of what they need to do. There's then a grant for $10,000 to purchase support to implement that action plan. And then, if I might just touch on ensuring that the disability workforce will be skilled to meet future requirements, we've recently announced funding through the Innovative Workforce Fund, which is run by National Disability Services, which includes an allocation of funding for researching and developing different workforce models that can be applied to the sector, and another allocation for innovative workforce-related projects over the next 2 years. It will support providers innovating in key areas of work design and workforce arrangements, and aims to drive change in the disability sector by building a strong evidence base to support the efficacy of innovative workforce approaches, promoting an evidence-based approach to promoting and sharing good practice, and making lessons learned from research and completed projects publicly available to the sector. State and territory governments have also invested heavily. We talked about Workability earlier and so forth. The NDIS orientation training package is something we have under development. It'll be, as I mentioned, mandatory. The Victorian government has an MOU with us to do that, and we're hoping to share that with jurisdictions towards the end of this year or early next year. So that's workforce. If I touch briefly on Commonwealth program transition, one of the things the Commonwealth's doing is $1.1 billion of our commitment to the NDIS is made through the Commonwealth programs that are transitioning in. And while our understanding of the workforce is developing, all governments are investing now to help encourage and support that workforce to develop in its existing providers. Some of you may be providing supports under these programs that are transitioning. So 17 programs, real diverse mix of things from early childhood programs, mental health, Australian Disability Enterprises, National Auslan Booking Service, Remote Hearing and Vision, and some carer programs as well, and I've missed a couple. Extensive work has been done to support providers of Commonwealth programs, and I was really interested to talk to Tony earlier, and we were saying about, need to keep doing these sorts of sessions like today and others, because even though you're all active and engaged, I did some of these with the mental health and carer providers last year, and there were some of them who were up to their eyeballs in it, and they were really focused on their transition, and others said, what does NDIS stand for again? Or it's just not coming to them, and they've got a full set of things on their plate, so you've got to come back and do it again a bit later when it is the right time for them. While most Commonwealth program clients are expected to be eligible for the NDIS, we've worked with state and territory governments to ensure continuity of support for those clients that do not meet NDIS eligibility requirements. The Commonwealth's case at the moment, well, all governments have made that commitment, but in the Commonwealth's case, we're supporting them through existing providers, and we've left money with those providers to support clients found ineligible. We hope to be able to communicate more broadly about our longer-term approach on those things, which will vary across the 17 programs. So, what does all this mean for providers? And what does all this mean for me? So some key things I'd like to leave with you just as I wind up. Our understanding of the NDIS is still developing. To some degree, we don't know what we don't know, but it's not through lack of trying, and we'll keep trying to share that information with you as it emerges. The NDIA and a number of other stakeholders, such as Workability here in Queensland, are producing fact sheets and documents with information about the market, its development and expected supply needs to meet participant demand at full scheme. Some of those things may be drier than others, but I'd encourage you to invest the time in having a look at those and understanding what it means in your local patch. Queensland market development is consistent with the national market and the phasing and transition approach adopted by the Queensland Government. There are some aspects of the market where more work is needed to understand what is driving the results, including plan utilisation and activation. But it's important to remember that these results are for the quarter of the participants currently in the scheme, and results will vary as the population increases. As data about the market improves, this information and intelligence will be easier to produce and more reliable. We're investing in a number of projects and working with the NDIA to expedite market signals and intelligence to support providers and workers make decisions about how and when to engage or grow their business in the NDIS market. While governments are investing in projects to support that development, providers and participants have key roles in shaping and developing the NDIS. As participant confidence in their capability and skills to be informed consumers exercising choice and control in the market grows, their demand signals will become more important and replace government market intelligence for providers to develop their business models and service offerings. And as providers innovate and offer new products, services or delivery models in the market, this will change and influence expectations of those participants. Providers are also essential to successfully growing the NDIS workforce. We need experienced providers to give new workers in the disability support sector opportunities to develop and consolidate their skills in delivering person-centred care to participants. This is true for personal care workers through to allied health professionals. Giving thought to your workforce needs and the learning and professional development opportunities you offer to potential workers could help to give you the edge in a competitive recruitment environment. Thank you all very much.